Howdy, everybody. This is the June 23rd iteration of the OpenJS Security Collaboration Space um, weekly meeting. Um, the agenda for today is focused on the secure releases guide that we've been working on. To kind of get things started here, let me send some links so we can all be on the same page. So this is the Google Doc that we've been working through. And let me share my screen so we can kind of all get up to speed together on what this involves. So just as a friendly reminder, initially we had like a brainstorming session where we talked about different topics. Okay, so actually let me step back for a second. The secure releases guide, the idea that we had around the 2.0 version of this was that, and this idea predates me, was that the OpenSSF's NPM best practices guide is now archived and is out of date. It makes recommendations that are no longer aligned to NPM's own documentation. And it also kind of focuses on some different things than maybe we think a NPM best practices guide could include. So with that in mind, we decided to take a stab at discussing, well, what really should be in this guide to make it a good NPM best practices guide. And that is where these topic idea brainstorming items came from initially. We had one of the previous meetings, we kind of did like a brainstorming brain dump of various ideas. Based upon that, I created this initial dependency related document because frankly, a lot of the original documentation in the NPM best practices guide around was focused around dependency management and dependency security. But after this, people weren't really happy with the approach with this. So we went back to the drawing board and kind of came to a consensus on what the initial focus for this guide should be. And the approach that we decided to take was that rather than trying to do one huge update with everything all at once, instead, we would take an incremental approach to updating it throughout the year. And so the items we see here around access management and automation, user accounts and access tokens was the consensus we came to for the initial update. And based upon that, I have been working on the 2.0 guide for a little bit to try to establish some sort of format for this document. Initially, the original version of the document does not have a lot of organizational structure to it compared to what we usually do, like in the context of the OpenJS security compliance guide. And so rather than, so instead, I took the approach of having very directive, do this or don't do that kind of sections based upon the features and topic. So with that, what I came up with, was two different ways of organizing these items. One is around these three high-level areas around user accounts, MFA, best practices around access tokens, and how to manage permissions. There's also another option here around organizing things around the concept of authentication and authorization best practices instead. But I suspect this option one is a better approach. So to kind of go through this really quick, the idea is that under the user accounts MFA best practices, we have a number of items. And the idea of this is, here is basically how to properly configure authentication for your npm package. And it discusses how to do this on a per feature basis. So it focuses on user accounts, organizations, packages, and the like. I'm not sure if it's necessary to document like the relevant features that are discussed in this section. I did this myself to help self-organize, but we can certainly take this stuff out. And another thing that is not completely done in this document right now, but I'll be working on this week, is actually talking about why do you do these things and discussing the actual threats that we're trying to address. So from there, we have detail for each of these. And the idea is that for each item, there's a directive, like do this or do that. It has a very brief description of exactly what you should do. If the concept needs more explanation, that's also there. But some of them are relatively straightforward. And also for some of these to explain the whys and wherefores and the threats, there's kind of like a Q&A sort or fact style of why do this with an answer. And then finally, for each one of these items, there's references to NPM or other documentation to help people to walk people through how to actually how to do these things. In addition to these references, right now they only reference NPM documentation, but I'm also going to update this to reference OpenJS's security compliance guidelines and also reference any kind of like blog posts or kind of authoritative in-depth discussion on the topic as well, so people can easily find a reference on the topic. So there's a couple of things that are a little up in the air that I'd like to talk about today, beside just general feedback as people peruse this really quick. There's a section here around recommendations around publishing methods. And we've talked about what we think about the best ways to publish before in the context of our other guidance around the package provenance and the like, and the upsides and downsides of publishing automatically versus publishing manually. So one topic I'd love to jump into today, in addition to general feedback, is what is our guidance around how to properly publish? We talked about this at length, but I think having a proper discussion focused on this and capturing people's thoughts so that we can fill in this section would be great. And also, doesn't have to happen now, but feedback on the structure of the document, feedback on the level of detail and the like would be super awesome, but it doesn't have to all happen right now. The other topic that, if we have time to discuss today, is securely storing and using granular access tokens. So rather than just having your password in plain text in a flat file on your workstation, what are some of the better ways that people typically use for to secure this and still be able to use their access tokens on the npm command line? So with that, any questions before we jump into these two specific discussions of publishing methods and secure use of access tokens? Okay, cool. So in the past, we've had some pretty strong feelings, I think, on automatic versus manual publishing because of the limits of GitHub Actions and their inability to support two-factor checks. I'd like to hear people's thoughts on different approaches to doing this and what maybe guidance should be for folks given this lack of a two-factor check and also making sure that publishing is like a very safe and not easily accessible process for folks. And if you don't mind, Jordan, I might call you out because I know you've had some feelings about this in the past.
Yeah, I opened the tab this morning, so I do need to review it, but I have
Sure.
not had a chance to do so yet.
I think rather than going through the document itself, like
Yeah.
we've talked about in the past around automatic versus manual publishing and safely doing that. And I just appreciate you kind of sharing and re-reviewing your feelings on that in the past, given GitHub's support for lack of support for two-factor checks.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're making things better in the sense that now you can, or shortly, you'll be able to do OIDC publishing, meaning currently you have to save a security token, um, and in the near future you'll be able to automatically like obtain one from GitHub at the right time in the publishing process based on your GitHub account. So it's still not two-factor, but it's less insecure than the token approach. Um, but that's still not sufficient for me to be super convinced that that's the way to go, um, until there's a way to pause a GitHub action and input a two-factor code or click a link or something. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think basically some of the nuance around the paths has shifted a little bit, but my overall position is the same, and likely will be until GitHub comes up with a way to solve this, which they still have not done.
The counter to this is that it is quite nice to be able to publish automatically. It does
Totally.
reduce the risk of human error on the workstation. It does reduce the risk of compromise of the developer's workstation itself.
Sure, but
I would love to hear folks' perspective on
the
that, those
human error
sorts of
one,
risks.
I mean, that just doesn't happen often. It certainly could, but like if you're gonna set up npm publish to work properly in CI, it'll also work identically locally. So like there's no human error to be had if you're capable of doing either path. And as far as the risk of compromise, I mean, sure, but like GitHub is a big permanently listening to the internet target, and developer machines are not. So um, like I don't really put a lot of stock in that personally, but certainly GitHub argues that. Um,
So yeah, I'd appreciate others' perspective on this, on
sure.
like discussing the risk of uh, some of the one of the top threats that and this is coming from a more corporate security background that um I was focused on here was the risk of maintainer device compromise, which really blows up which creates a lot of problems and requires a more defense in depth approach. So I'm not sure. Um, Jordan, you just mentioned like you don't think that's too big of a risk, but I'd like to hear other people's perspective on whether or not that is actually a threat that we should really keep in mind in this document, or if we should deprioritize that threat versus other methods of account compromise and takeover.
Yeah. It's also notable that there's no way to force a package to only be published from CI. Uh, there's always an npm account that could be compromised, and then anything could be published from it. So,
Right.
Yeah, I almost feel like we should just publish or write it up such that you can choose either option. You just the caveats of selecting each one um, need to be highlighted so that a person, whether Jordan is going to do everything manually because he doesn't trust something, or somebody else is going to do something for the convenience of having a GitHub action publish something with a granular access token or something restricted by scope and package name, whatever. I just feel like we should probably have what makes sense for both scenarios and then call
Yeah.
out the drawbacks of each one.
Yeah, exactly. I don't in any way object to guides telling people how to publish from CI. The only thing
No.
I object to is like the lack
Yep.
of
Yeah, and I'm not picking on
treating them
you.
off the
Yeah.
no. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I think you have exactly the right suggestion. I think that as long as people can make their own decision
Exactly.
with
The
both
information.
honest and accurate paths, then we've done our job.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool.
Until there's
That's
a better,
actually
until there's an absolute pure golden path for secure releases, I think that's our only option.
got it. Cool. That's actually really helpful. So in terms of pros and cons, I'd love to hear people's thoughts on some of the big items that come to mind for folks on the benefits and downsides of publishing automatically beside the two-factor check, lack of two-factor check in GitHub actions. So things that come to mind for me are folks with write access to the repo can access that credential in GitHub secrets. But I'm not sure what other potential pros and cons there are to this. And I'd appreciate folks' perspective who have actually run projects and done this. Buddy, I see we have like another whole side meeting going on in the chat now around CNAs.
I think one of the downsides also if you publish from the CI is because the token it's owned by one user and not like a team or something like that. Then when you get the emails, for example, it will be something like that person has published this version of the package with my specifically not be that person. It can be someone else, right, with different level permissions on the repo. So that might be a tricky one.
Is this might be a really dumb idea, but how do you all feel about the idea of there being like an NPM account that's like a service account that specific people have access to and can use versus people creating access tokens on their personal accounts that are then used by others during in automation?
I personally have used that in the past, like inside of a company, and it was tricky as hell because then the rotation of tokens becomes a problem as well. Because I mean, if you change membership on that team, then you need to rotate the tokens. Rotate the tokens is extremely tedious. So yeah, it's even worse. So yeah, I mean, no matter what you do, you should. I mean, you should rotate them regularly, right? But yeah, it's hard because you have to go one by one every repository where you have your secrets. So that's not an easy task in time frame.
Yeah, actually, on that point, Ulysses, Steve, you mentioned in the doc that like 2 years for token expiration was a little long, and I couldn't agree more on that. But I think when we talked about this idea during brainstorming and consensus, the feeling was like 1 year was too intense for volunteers who aren't getting paid.
Yeah.
Um,
Even two,
Yeah.
it can be a little bit. Yeah.
I totally get it. It's just, you know, the enterprise cyber person in me goes, oh my goodness, 2 years. That's an eternity.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, like ours are, you know, even our passwords internally are a lot less than that.
Didn't somebody come out and say that the password rotation frequency was like actually bad for security?
Yeah, I'm sure it
Yes.
is, but it
Yes.
makes some people feel better.
The NIST guidance changed, but I'm not sure if the guidance for financial entities in other contexts has changed to reflect the NIST guidance. I would not be shocked if it had not. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely right, Chris. Like password complexity, great, but the NIST guidelines now completely focus on um, passkeys and passwordless authentication methods instead, and say drop passwords entirely.
Passwords are still fine if you're using a password manager that has a different password for each service. It's just not everyone does that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Um, cool. So, is there anything else on pros and cons of publishing manually versus automatically that comes to mind for folks that's worth mentioning?
Another controversial thing might be like when you do publication of the npm packages locally, depends on how you do the setup of the package. If you specify the files that you want to upload or not, you might be dragging more files than you expect, which is a tricky thing. Obviously, if you do the dry run and you validate that and you're sure, which you should do, then you avoid publicating things that you don't expect to publish. But sometimes you might publish things because you just check out the ground branch, you just drag files that are not expected, things like that. That's for me, that's one of the biggest difference between local and CI. Also, that when you do it from local, I mean, in my experience, which is quite limited on this, is like sometimes the people tend to avoid, to include these steps on the CI. So you end up having like some really not very replicable packages in terms of when you try to republish them again, if you have a fork or whatever, you end up having a different library, which is not the ideal situation, right? So that might also tricky. Some people, especially if you use TypeScript, stuff like that, you might skip some of the, steps when you are doing the CI, but not when you do it locally and stuff like that. So, and those end up not being documented. And, when you change maintainers, that somehow disappears, that knowledge also. So yeah, that's one of the downsides locally versus CI. Also, in terms of security, when we talk about local machines, that might be tricky as well, because, for example, if you think on the corporate environment, you might have a lot of, expectations, like, encrypted disk, stuff like that, that you might have or not on your personal device, because that really 100% depends on your equipment and preferences personally, and whatever you do or not on your knowledge and capabilities. So you might end up having a laptop that can be stolen with all your credentials there ready to publish stuff without encryption. That might happen. I don't think it's the common thing, but these kind of scenarios can happen. Also, personal computers that are purely personal computers are more trained to, get malware from just surfing on the web, and trying, I won't say that like illegal games or pirate games or whatever, and you can be polluted and stuff like that, right? So because you have one device maybe and you use it for everything, then it's tricky, different than enterprise. But yeah, that's not the common, but it might happen, right? Because it's a different criteria. So when we think on personal computers, that's also important for individuals.
This has been really helpful. Thanks, Ulysses. Any other immediate thoughts that come to mind on pros and cons of publishing automatically versus manually? I don't mean to call you out, Raf, but since you do this a lot and think about it a lot, I'd love to hear your take on this. Oh, I don't think we can hear you.
I think it should be fixed now. Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yes.
Uh, uh, I'm a bit lost, to be honest. I'm working on a different security task, and would you mind asking again?
We're talking about recommendations and pros and cons on publishing to NPM locally versus using automation CI to publish.
Um, I don't have any suggestion on that prompt, to be honest, because most of the work we do, we don't publish packages for users
Mm.
to view. We normally follow some best practices from document, but honestly, I was looking to the document you and Ulysses was creating to design the is my node vulnerable, for instance. So I don't have much to add on that front.
All right, cool. Thanks, Ulysses. Raf, sorry about that. All right, cool. If people don't have anything else, I have one more topic I'd like to get folks' thoughts on, and I suspect you'll have. Oh, go ahead, Ulysses.
Yeah, one last thing on the CI publication. I think specifically in the case of the open source, for example, you might end up building a team around your library, and you might trust your collaborators enough to give them commit permission and probably the options to release using the CI pipelines, but not give them access on npm directly to publish releases, right? So that way you can have some GitHub in between on the releases. This might be a good option to reduce the time to mitigation, because there are some cases, for example, if there is only one maintainer who has the publication right and is on holidays, for example, you might be waiting 1 week to release something that might be urgent just because that person is not available or whatever reason, right? So you really depend on a single person who can actually do the second factor authentication process, authentication and so on, where if you have a releasing process in place, other people can do it without revealing or without giving fully access on npm, which is also quite common practice, I think, outside of the foundation in some projects where the people actually give you like the access as a maintainer, but technically they don't transfer you the npm packages, and you can just publish via CI or whatever, but you take ownership on whatever is shipped, if that makes sense.
That's actually a really good call out. Thanks, Ulysses. Cool. Anything else before we hop into the next topic? Hi, Toby. We don't have a ton of time left. I'm happy to defer to you, but I can't click on that link at the moment. So if you want,
It's not working. Okay, no, you should just go ahead
It
with
worked.
you should go
worked.
ahead with what you wanted to talk about.
Okay, cool.
And this is just the threat modeling community wants to do something with open source projects next year. I just wanted to raise that in the chat. Wanted to discuss this with you all. That can also be like in a couple of weeks that we're.
All right, cool. So the next question I have for folks, and this is going to be somewhat a personal anecdotal question, but I'm looking for people's perspectives, is that when publishing locally, how are folks securing their access tokens? Are folks actually just storing them in a flat file on disk and just hoping for the best?
Sorry, storing what?
How are folks storing their access tokens when they publish locally?
Whoa.
npm stores your login token in your home directories.npmrc file. That's how it's worked for
That's right.
15 years.
But that's a flat file that contains a password on disk.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah. So are there better ways of doing that instead of storing your password in a plain text file?
Well, it's not your password. It's a token that can be
Well, it's a
revoked.
token, yes. Yes,
So
so it's a
only-
credential.
It's only
a
good for
credential.
one time unless you.
No,
select
it's good. I've
5
had the same
minutes.
npm token for 12 years. It's good until you revoke it.
When you go to publish, you don't
Yeah.
get you npm publish and it doesn't ask you for any kind of verification.
I have two-factor turned on, so it asks me to publish with two-factor, but
Okay,
It
maybe
doesn't.
that's what I'm thinking of then.
Yeah, that's the
your
one-time thing.
MFA.
And NPM
okay.
forces two-factor for any package
Okay.
author or on authors for any package that is used enough. So
Okay,
I've
okay.
been
So-
forced to use it since for a long time.
Right. Okay,
but
so every
the-
time you
the-
publish, it's going to ask for the 2FA or MFA.
Yeah, but
okay.
the NPM login token, which gives you the ability to grant publish access, for example,
Okay.
that is it change. You know, that doesn't change unless you make it change. And I haven't typed npm login in a decade because I just
Right,
keep my
that's
npm rc file.
right. That's exactly why I'm like, what are you even talking about?
Right.
Didn't even think about this at all.
But yeah, so as far as
okay.
a better way, right? I mean, like I think the two-factor has removed that as a problem. Any package that matters is going to require two-factor from npm's side, and so it doesn't matter that there's a long-lived token in that file because you still need to either visit a web link that you've logged into to a session, or you need to type in an TOTP code.
Oh, even if there is an access, even if you're using like a single factor granular
Well,
access
no,
token.
that's what I'm saying is that if you're using a single factor, then you're correct about the issue. But
Oh, I see.
npm does not allow anyone to publish without a second factor. And on a package that has like, unless you make a separate publish token, which that's only used for CI publishing. Nobody does that locally. If you did put a publish token locally, then that would be reintroducing the problem on such a package. But I'm pretty confident nobody's doing that.
Got it. So even if you have that access token just stored in the flat file, you're still getting prompted for 2FA and being given a link anyway. Got it. That was not very obvious or clear in the npm documentation, frankly.
Basically, they had to add a new kind of token, publish tokens, because they had already forced two-factor on the login tokens, and CI publishers didn't have a proper way to do it, and so they basically created an escape hatch from two-factor, which is publish tokens. And that's the way everybody is able to publish from CI. Without that deliberate security hole, there wouldn't be a way to publish from CI.
Got it. Ulysses.
Yeah, I think that while publication is not an issue because of the second factor authentication, the problem is with that token, if I remember well, you can still read in private npm packages, for example. So if your npm account or you work for an organization that has public packages open source and private packages that are not open source, you might be leaking those if someone gets access to the token, because it's not going to ask you for second factor authentication to pull that data, right? To do the npm installation or pulling that data, which might be unexpected. Probably not very relevant for open source maintainers, but yes, relevant for corporate open source.
One of the things I dug into as a security nerd to understand more about this is how could one not store this access token in the flat file and instead put it in a keychain somewhere or a password manager and access it from there on the command line. And my research on this indicates that there are libraries that support this. You can write your own code to put a wrapper around this so that you can access like iCloud Keychain or Windows Hello or 1Password through their APIs. Is that just too much or too crazy for this? It seems reasonable from a corporate security person's perspective, but I don't know if this is really unrealistic and unreasonable for this guy. Does anybody know anyone who is using a password manager or keychain like that while using the npm command line? Ulysses?
I personally log out. For example, if I publish a package, whatever, I normally log in, then I publish. If I don't plan to do npm stuff soon, I just log out. And if I use the GitHub CLI, for example, which is not very common on my case, I know that some people use it all the time, not my case. So for example, in that case, I tend to log out as well if I'm not planning to use it, or the tokens that I use for specific tools, like for example, there is this tool for the Node.js that you can, we have a lot of stuff, so you can land PRs and stuff like that. If I'm not planning to use that soon, I revoke the token. So next time it's going to ask me for the authentication, so that way I don't have to be super tricky on, try to make it the files less, making a over engineering on top of. I just prefer to, just deprecate or just disconnect and later on reconnect, which is a simple step in many cases, and that way I go. But I think depends on the frequency of your usage. In my case, it's normally casual, so I can just log out and log in when I need.
So npm login creates legacy tokens, which we are recommending people don't use. And Ulysses, you're doing the right thing. Like if you are using that, then you're immediately revoking it afterwards. Are you doing that manually? Because I don't. My understanding is npm logout does not clean that up afterwards.
I do that manually. So and
Gotcha.
sometimes I probably forget if I'm doing multitasking, which can happen as well.
Well, to be clear, I don't think we have to say anything about when you say legacy, like there's login tokens and publish tokens. And if people are using a login token without two-factor, that's because their package doesn't matter, right? And as soon as it matters, they'll be required to use two-factor to publish. It's only if they're using the publish tokens outside of a trusted CI environment. Like that's a bad thing, but I also don't think we need to say anything about that because I don't think anyone's doing that. But we could. And then like the thing we were talking about earlier is the like acknowledging the caveats of publishing with a publish token from CI, which is a single factor. But it's the only way to get that kind of developer experience and convenience.
I thought publish tokens supported two-factor checks.
I don't believe there's no way to do two-factor from CI. So like if I have a published token locally, it will bypass two-factor. And there's published tokens for your account, and there's also now granular published tokens. And the granular ones are far superior because that exposes one package instead of every package that instead of your whole account. But other than the advice we should give should be to use a granular publish token if you're publishing from CI. Right. And then note these caveats, right? And there's three settings on a package. One is where you can choose to, when the package isn't implicitly forced to use two-factor because of its usage, you can choose don't require two-factor, or you can choose work with two-factor or an automation or granular access token. Automation is the term that they use apparently, or you can say require it and disallow tokens. I also would be more comfortable if there was a fourth option, require two-factor authentication or granular access tokens, but not account automation tokens. Because then I would set that up, because then if I've chosen to set up a token for that one package, then it could use it. But there's no middle ground there at the moment.
Yeah. Cool. This is helpful. So it sounds like to me, some of the stuff I put into the doc as initial recommendations around using keychains or password managers to store the access token instead is really not necessary, so long as the package, as long as the package or the organization is set to only, the user account's only set up to support two-factor or single-factor granular access tokens or published legacy tokens, because that prompt will still happen. Is that correct?
It sounds right. I'll want to look at something written down so I can think through it properly.
Gotcha. Just conceptually right now. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome sauce. Alrighty. So I think I have enough now to go work on those sections of the doc. I'm looking forward to hearing your all's thoughts and perspectives and feedback on the doc where it is right now. Some of the feedback I really appreciate is on just the structure of it and what kind of content and how things are organized. Very open-minded on that. This is just a first chop. And frankly, the structure of the document is at the moment really optimized for the creation of document and organizing thoughts. So if there's anything else, if folks have any feelings on what's in there right now or how it's organized, please drop those comments in the doc itself.
Can we use the last quick 5 minutes for Toby to flag?
That's exactly what I was hoping to do.
Yeah, let's jump
Yeah.
to Toby. Yep.
Oh,
Cool.
wonderful. Cool. Perfect. Thank you. So this is someone that I know really well from the CRA work that sort of is bridging this threat modeling community in open source. And was looking for so it's a hackathon that they've been doing every year for a number of years. And for the first years, they were sort of making up a made up product and like had a threat modeling contest for that product. And what they want to do now, and I think they already did this this session, is identify open source projects that are willing to participate in this and actually do a real threat modeling exercise for each of those open source projects. And so the deal is you get to learn about threat modeling, you give a few hours of your time, they say 5 or 6, to work with a team that is essentially trying to do the best threat modeling exercise possible for your project. And as a result, you come out with a threat model for your project, which I think is pretty interesting and pretty cool. So that's kind of the idea, and they're looking, I think, for like 60 open source projects to do this. So it's a sizable exercise. I think they had like 50 or 60 last year, and they want to do more this year. The person that is running this is the head of the chapter for OWASP Belgium. And he's a great guy. Like I super trust him. So he's really serious, and he'd love to have a chat with folks who are interested. So Jordan showed interest. And I think Ulysses, you were suggesting Express might be a good candidate. This is also something that Lodash could be interesting to do the work with if JDD is interested in. And of course, like Node.js would be great. Raphael, I don't know if that's something that you'd be interested in. So anyway, the ask is there anyone that's interested in this? And can I put you and Maxime in contact so you hash it out and figure out if like there's interest to move like to the next steps?
Yeah, Robin, I was just going to
Yes,
suggest the same thing. Also, at the end of this week, as a part of the evaluations of OpenJS projects, we'll also have a list of the projects that do and do not have a threat model published publicly. So that we'll have that insight as well at the end of the week.
Oh, wow. Do
Also,
some projects
any
have
open
this?
Yeah, I mean, so NVM has one specifically because the OpenJS and through the Sovereign Tech Fund did a security audit, and the security auditing firm gave me permission to steal the threat model and use it. So
Very nice.
I suspect that any of the projects that have gone through that security audit will have one already, and the rest probably won't.
Super cool. Yeah, from my perspective, I'm also super interested to know the sort of like standard formats in which those are provided, and if like they're easy to share and that kind of stuff. So I'm interested in sort of like in the meta space.
The
But
other
yeah,
thing, sorry, I
definitely.
just wanted to add real quick, GitHub's secure open source program, through which all OpenJS projects are eligible, also has you build a threat model as part of it, and there's templates for it in there. I haven't done it yet so like OpenJS projects may or may not need additional help because they'll have it this way.
Sure.
But
Very cool.
nonetheless, it's still a useful exercise, I think.
So hit me up if you're interested in make intro. Jordan, do I count you as a yes from like the yes?
Yeah.
Ulysses, you want
please.
me to introduce you too? Would that be useful? Yeah, cool. All right. And then yeah, happy to just share like the text with you, Robin, and like have a mail. That would be great. And Raphael, if you're interested, of course, I'm also like more than happy to do the intro. Yes.
Yeah,
I
please.
don't have a good email for you.
I'm going to send the chat.
All right, cool. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Perfect. All right, folks. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks,
Appreciate it.
everyone. Take
Thanks,
care.
Toby. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.